You want to tell them about our watch?
Our watch. By the way, I've had a fellow come up to me and said, do you realize that you and Harold have the exact same watch? I said, yes, I do. He's borrowed it from me 3 times so far. So, anyway, well, this is where Harold answers all of your questions. And, and it'll be really good. I'm looking forward to this. This is the best seat I've had for one of these things. I'll pull them out, and you tell them what it means.
Age before beauty.
Yeah. What do you cover during your first meetings with a newcomer or new sponsee?
Well, for me personally, I'm Harold. I'm an alcoholic. And I think we just go back to the book, where the book asks us the simple question, the most important question: are you willing to go to any lengths to have achieve sobriety, to have victory over alcohol? That's the first commitment I get from anybody that I'm going to spend any time with, to see where their heart's at and where they're at, and depends on what the setting is. If it's out in the general public, then I'm a book guy. I like to get right into the book and talk about that. But I like to ask questions. I like to ask open-ended questions. I like to ask closed-ended questions. I just want to see where they're at in their journey and just how sold out they are to have this thing. And validating that, I think, is the most important thing, and for me personally. Starting with them, if it's inside a prison institution, same kind of concept, but really it's back into, we do the correction workshops, and that's how we do the steps with the guys, and we have a whole systematic program how we do that, and we get them into the steps that way, and it works extremely well. So I guess it just depends on the setting, but for me, it rolls down to that very first question for me. Where are you at in your journey, and are you willing to go any length to take the next step, in your recovery, and then we get into the book, and we start marching through the steps, and we start talking about what does it mean to be powerless over alcohol, and what does it mean for your life to be unmanageable, and we just go through the process of the steps. But that's how I address a newcomer. It's how I've done it for years and years and years, and it works. It works for me. Yeah.
Well, I think you did very good. I think it depends on where that meeting is, and I mean, because I don't have any really set rules. I do try to follow what the book says. Number one, I always try to qualify the guy. Is this where you belong? Because we have a lot of guys that come in our groups or come in to treatment centers that are a little confused about what we're supposed to be doing here. It's kind of hard for me to pitch you on alcoholism if you don't have that disease, and because we don't know. There's a lot of people been sent by the courts recently in our area that they got their first DUI, and in Texas now, if you get a DUI, you're going to the court. The court's going to send you to AA. So I'm like, I guess what you're saying is exactly right. How committed are you to this? Do you really want to do this deal? Because it says we don't want to waste our time on someone who doesn't want what you have, when your time can be better spent trying to help somebody who does want to do this. That's it. It's your turn to draw.
It's a long one, Danny. With over 5 years of sobriety, my spiritual life is lacking. I think I'm willing and teachable. I believe in a power greater than myself. I pray regularly, but I can't seem to turn my will and life over to the care of God. What do you recommend I do to deepen my faith and turn my will and life over to the care of God?
Have you not been to any of these meetings? I've been. Hell, I've told jokes, I've cried, I've done everything I can do to get you to do that. In all seriousness, I know exactly, how you feel. That's just, and I think nearly everybody gets to that place where it's like, okay, I've done everything I can do, now what? And You know, I don't know anything else to do except to continue to pray and to help others. I have had to walk through some dark spots, and I come out on the other side and it's lighter and it's brighter. I do know that if you redouble your spiritual efforts, it makes a difference. You know, and I had to go back and, I'm kind of like in that place right now. I'm out there. I mean, my faith in God is back, but I'm back to really recommitting myself to the program of action instead of just coasting along. Because you get like that, and for me, I get like that, and then I start examining my navel, and I want to know what's wrong with me. And in a little while, you come by and want help, and I don't have time to talk to you because I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with me. And I think sometimes trying to find out, how you can help somebody else will alleviate that awful obsession about what's missing in me.
Yeah. Can we get a big book? Somebody got a big book we can borrow? Handy? I got one there. Thank you. Well, I think, what Danny's talking about is right on. And it goes back to that question we asked earlier today. I mean, when we get to step 3, what do we mean by that and what do we do? And the first requirement is that we have to be convinced that a life run on self could hardly be a success. That's the first requirement of taking step 3. And then we get to the next part, and it says next, hereafter in the drama of life, God's going to be our director. He's the employer, I'm the employee. He's the director, I am the agent. And then it gives us what I call the third step prayer promises, what I like to call the third step prayer promises, on the top of page 63. And these are just, it's profound stuff. But when I do see how my life based on self can hardly be a success, and I can deny myself, basically die to myself. I can just surrender my ideas, my thoughts, my whatever, my hurts, habits, and hang-ups over to a power greater than myself. That's the first part of this. But the next, that I'm going to trust in this power. And on top page 63, it says, when I sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer being all powerful. He provided what we needed. But here's the kicker. If we kept close to him and performed his work well. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, and as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we become conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. That's just powerful, powerful, powerful stuff. But the kicker is there's some action involved for me, and it really boils down to surrender. And Bill, I think, over on page 14, Bill really tells us how to perfect and enlarge our spiritual life. And it says, faith without works is dead, he said, and how appalling true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. And if he did not work, he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. And then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it's just like that. And so I think that's how we grow spiritually and enlarge our life, is through self-sacrifice. We're self-centered creatures to the extreme, although our book says we usually don't think so. And I think that's a pretty accurate description. But the only solution I found to extreme self-centeredness is extreme other-centeredness. And I have to have the Spirit of God working in my life for that to happen. There's just no way that I wouldn't even spit on you if you were on fire, when I got here, and for me to pour out my life, give up my time, give up my resources, whatever, for your benefit at my sacrifice, there has to be something that happens to my heart. It has to be transformed for that to happen. And that gives us a clear-cut recipe. So it just boils down to surrender, and that's where sponsorship comes into play. That I humble myself to sponsorship, and I just take that direction. Not necessarily always going to believe in it, not always going to buy into the direction, but if it matches up with what that book says, then I think I'm on the right track, and I've trusted it long enough, it's changed my life. So that's what I would encourage you to take a look at and take an inventory on. We have a lot of fans in recovery. A lot of people are fans of AA, fans of the steps, but they're not really committed and they're not really devoted to this thing. And that's why you feel like you're looking from the outside in. So that's my challenge to you. Thanks.
I'll read this one for you. Dear Harold, blah, blah, blah. No. Dear Harold, would you please elaborate on the need for our tolerance towards people who come to AA, sometimes on the treatment center van, who have problems other than alcoholism? We still have some responsibility to point them towards God and to other recovery programs, don't we?
Well, I think absolutely we do. I mean, we're love and tolerance. I mean, I was in Oklahoma not too long ago and talking to the guys there, and they said the drug court system in their township is the ratio is 5 to 1. For every one AA member they had 5 people coming in to AA. And they were challenged with that. And we got 3 purposes in AA. We got singleness of purpose, our primary purpose, and our real purpose. And so we have a stewardship as it relates to the traditions, and we have to honor that, and we have to ask questions, and we have to know what traditions and Tradition 3 says, and about being a serious drinker, et cetera. But I've been around a lot of AA groups and a lot of men groups that are pretty freaking harsh when it comes to how they deal with people that just show up there because that's where they were pointing to go. Matter of fact, I know one in St. Louis that meets on Friday night that will say, if you ain't an alcoholic, then they all stand up and say at the same time, you can get the effing out of here. And that's pretty freaking harsh. And that's the kind of stuff that goes on. It doesn't jive with love and tolerance as our code. I can remember years ago in our prison group in Pacific, Missouri, and one of the prisons there we had a huge influx of junkies, drug addicts coming into our group, and it was an open meeting of AA. And they come in, and of course they're welcome. It's an open meeting. But you might have 10 guys in a row that, hey, I'm Frankie, I'm a junkie, I'm Tony, I'm a dopehead, I'm, whatever. It goes on and on and on. And they have an NA meeting going on in that facility, and you ask them, you guys go to the NA program? And they're like, yeah, we try, but it's not like it is here. We love the recovery here, we love the enthusiasm here, we love the structure here, we love everything about this group, we love coming here, and we just love it. And this is where we want to come. So, what do you do in that situation? What do you do when you got that kind of challenge that in your doorstep, and you have to be a steward of singleness of purpose and honor the traditions, which singleness of purpose is probably one of the biggest threats we have in Alcoholics Anonymous. We could sit here and do a whole workshop on singleness of purpose. But what I've learned and what I've been taught over the years, and if you go over to page 164, and it says there, the first full paragraph, it says, still you may say, but I don't have the benefit of the contact for those who wrote this book. We cannot be sure, but God will determine that. So you must remember that your real reliance is always upon Him, and He will show you how to create the fellowship that you crave. So what we did in that situation with that group is that they told us what they wanted. They told us what they needed. They needed a dynamic NA group with a similar structure and with a similar program like we had. So what do we do as stewardships in AA? We went out and found a couple rock star NA guys that were willing to become volunteers and bring the NA meeting into that facility and start the same kind of format with the same enthusiasm, with the same passion, with the same thunder. And that group still meets today. That's probably 15 years ago. That's the biggest group that meets inside that prison every Thursday night. So that's how my perspective of our traditions and the theme of love and service, how we have to address those issues, that we can help them, point them in the right direction, help them find solutions for what they're looking for, because they're craving the same thing we are. They're craving the exact same relationship with God. They're craving a solution for their problem. And so that's my 2 cents. What about you, Big D?
I agree. I think Steve wrote this.
Well, let me read it for you. It's for you. Dear Danny, how do you keep sponsees with 20 plus years spiritually growing?
I told you. Yeah. No, that really is a good question, because when you're here for a while, it's really easy to just fall into to this rhythm of getting up, saying your prayers, going to meetings, checking in, and not realizing that little by slow, you're maladjusting. You know, you find at least I did. I found myself more interested in some of the more desirable aspects of service and less interested. You know, we were talking about somebody, I don't know if it's Steve or you talked about becoming a manager. You know, you have sponsees, and we have, you know, there's a guy that needs some help, and he comes to you, and you know he needs help, and you want to help him, so you point out to O'Hara, who I sponsor, and say, this guy could use some help too, and you know, you put them together, and you feel like you've really done your duty, but you haven't, because he came to you, he didn't go to him, and that becomes the easiest thing to start to have a management style, and before long, you know, you're just sitting on the back seat of everything in your life. And you wonder, just like that guy that wrote that had the 5-year dilemma, you get that same way. But you know, the answer is always the same. It's to go back to the basics, and it's to start at the, for me, it's to start at the very beginning, and to get involved again with new people, and to recommit to doing the stuff. Steve and Don started doing the 11th step with great attention to detail. And it has invigorated us not only to do the 11th step, but to go back and say, you know, what am I doing with the guys I'm working with? And then every time that you point me away from myself and my comfort zone, I grow. I do better. That's it.
Good job. Thank you.
So you can relax. Is it my turn to read one?
Yeah, I guess so.
What is your favorite slogan and why?
Favorite slogan. I don't know if I have a favorite slogan. I can't really say that I've got a favorite slogan. Be honest with you. I'm trying to think if I have a favorite slogan that I say a lot. But, you know, it's let go and let God. I mean, you know, that's probably, if I had to pick one, it would be that. You know, and because that's been the hardest thing for me as a member, as a man, as a member of the fellowship to adhere to, let go, and wanting to manage my own life, wanting to control my own life has been the biggest spiritual battle that I've had since I got here. Continues to be the biggest spiritual battle in my life, is to want to manage my own life. Each day, you know, you wake up in the morning and it's like your head's a radio station or dialed in on a dashboard. It's on WIFM. You know, what's in it for me? You know, every day the station is dialed right in on that. You know, and it's like I got a choice to make. That I can ask God to remove me from the bondage of self, or I can just crank that up and get into my deal for the day. You know, and it could be anything, and it's amazing what happens. I mean, you know, it's just, but it's having that process. So letting go, letting God, and I guess coming up with, you know, whatever little things you got to do. Some people, you know, I mean, for years it was tough for me to go in the house sometimes when I got home, because, you know, just because of my self-centeredness, because I expected the house to look a certain way, and the kids were all crazy, and there's 10 bicycles outside my house, you know, and you know, girls running all over the place, and I'd have to literally stop in my driveway and pray before I went in that house, you know, just so I, you know, for love and tolerance. But I can remember I was about 10 years sober, and I was really struggling with that. You know, I had all these expectations on how things should be in my life, and when people didn't measure up to that, it caused tremendous frustration in my life, and I just had a hard time letting go. And I was at a conference in Springfield, Missouri. It wasn't an AA conference; it was a business conference, and I went out with one of the guys that was leading the program. He was from Georgia. He's a very successful insurance guy. His name was Jerry, and Jerry and I went out, and he didn't know me from China. We were sitting there eating. He goes, "Man, you look a little tense." And I said, "I do?" And he goes, "Yeah, you look like you're real tight." And he said, "What's going on?" And for whatever reason, I was just able to open up with the struggles that I was having in my life. And he says, "Well, let me share a true story with you that happened to me, and maybe this will make a difference in your life." And I said, "Go ahead." And he was building a new home outside Atlanta, about 70 miles outside Atlanta, beautiful custom home. And he hired a pretty famous custom home builder there in Georgia to build this home for him. And every Friday, he would get off work about 4, he'd take off early, and he would drive the 70 miles out to to see what kind of progress they made on this house from the week before. And he said this one, and he usually says on Friday, by the time I get out there, 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, everybody be gone. I could just walk through the house and really just take in the scenery and enjoy the house, look at the progress they made. He said this one particular time I got there, and there was Big John. He was still there, and John was a big old boy, big guy, big hands, big head, just a big guy. He said I showed up and Big John was still there. He goes, I was surprised John was still there, and I pulled up and John comes out and he's just red. You could tell he's angry. You could tell he's hot. And I said, Johnny, what's up? He goes, it hasn't been a good day, Jerry. And he says, why is that? He says, well, my truck wouldn't start right this morning. I finally got it going. I got out here to the job. This is before cell phones were popular. And he says, the materials we needed for the day's work didn't show up, so I sent everybody home early. I stuck around for a while, and I went to leave, and the truck wouldn't start. I've been stuck out there for about 3 hours, out in the middle of nowhere, not sure what I was going to do or how I was going to get home. He goes, so I'm not very happy. He goes, well, Jerry said, how about I give you a ride home? He goes, that's about 80 miles the other direction. He said, that's fine, I'll give you a ride. So they said they got in the car, and this guy was so mad he just slammed the door. And he got in the car, he didn't say nothing for 80 miles. So you could just feel the heat coming off this guy. He said they pulled up in front of his house, and he got out, and he looked back in the car. He says, Jerry, you want to come in and have dinner with me and my family? And he goes, no, John, I think I'm going to pass. He goes, I'm going to get on back to Missouri. He goes, well, at least want you to come in and meet my wife. He says, all right, I'll do that. He says they got out and he walked across the yard, and there's this little tree in his yard. He said that guy reached back and he slapped that tree so hard he thought he was going to rip it right out of the ground. And he said he was just taken back. This guy's angry. He says he got up to the stairs of his porch, and he said he sat down, and the guy unlaced his boots, and his whole world changed. He said, this guy's world changed. Everything went away. The wrinkles, the color of his skin, it just all changed. It was all gone, and his wife come out and put her arms around him. He had a big smile on his face. The dog come out, the kids come out, and he said that it was just a total transformation in a matter of seconds, and he couldn't believe it. And said when they sit there and visit her for a little bit, and they were leaving, they were walking back to the car, and he couldn't take it anymore. He turned around, he said, John, I got to ask you. Because I got to ask you a personal question. He goes, what is it? He goes, man, you got in my car, and you were so angry, you slammed the door. We drove 80 miles together. You never said one thing to me. We get to your house, you open my door, you get out, we walk across the yard, you slap that poor little tree. I thought you got to rip it out of the ground. And then we sit down, you take off your boots, and your whole world changed. And you tell me what happened. He said, yeah, I can tell you what happened. He said, I learned about 20 years ago that my wife didn't need a grizzly bear coming home. My kids needed her dad, my wife needed her husband, and the dog needed her owner. They didn't need all my brood of all my problems. He says, that poor little tree you see right there? He goes, I've been slapping my problems on that tree every day for the last 20 years. And he goes, in the morning I pick them back up. And he goes, they're never as big in the morning when I pick them back up as they were the night before. And I thought, what a tremendous lesson, for me to learn that that's how I have to do. And that's however you got to learn to let go and let God. So I guess let go and let God would be it for me.
Me too.
Danny, have you ever helped start a men's group? And if so, how would you go about that? Question 2, how do you sponsor people long distance? So you get two-part question.
Well, as a matter of fact, I just started a men's group, and how I go about it is I'm calling Joe and saying, how do we do this? Because I actually know I have not. I have always been a joiner, but I've reached a point in my life where there really wasn't anything to join that was going to fit the bill, and so I've started a men's group, and I'm trying to fashion it after what you guys do here, especially what Joe is doing there. So that's quite frankly, that is exactly the answer to that. And what was the other part?
How do you sponsor people long distance?
I don't sponsor people long distance if they're new. If they're fairly new, I just won't do it. Because I don't know about you, but when I was new, I just would be happy to tell you what you needed, what I thought you needed to hear. I wanted something that I could say in the meeting that would impress people. You need eyeball to eyeball, I think, if you're fairly new, or if you're in a lot of trouble. Sponsoring guys who've been around a while I've sponsored probably 5 guys long distance, and I'm sponsored long distance. But even at that, I I like to know that the guy that I'm sponsoring is tapped in to the group he's in, that he's got people that he's accountable, a pace horse, if you will. He's got someone that he's accountable to as he walks down that road. I mean, if he wants to have that talk with me and me help him with 10, 11, and 12 and just things in life, then I do it. But I think local sponsorship is probably the best thing ever, to be honest with you.
Very good. Yeah, on the last question, sponsorships, for me, it's about accountability. It's about somebody who's not emotionally involved in your life. And eyeball-to-eyeball contact is absolutely huge, and especially in the beginning. I mean, for me, I was so lost. I mean, and so broken of a guy. I mean, I was just broken. I was absolutely fractured, and I had no skills. I didn't even know how to be honest with myself. I never knew if I was being honest with myself half the time. So having somebody that wasn't emotionally involved in my life to sit there and could hear me out and really direct me in the right direction was absolutely huge for me. I have long distance sponsorship today, but I have for probably 10 years. But when that came to play for me, the rules of the game, if you want to call it, were established. And this is what it's going to be like. And it was a weekly accountability, and it was a commitment to honest sharing. And it's not, you can look at my life from a recovery standpoint. I look pretty busy, going to meetings, going to jail meetings. I mean, you look busy. But that wasn't really what needed to be challenged to me. It was what's going on between your ears, and what's going on in your prayer life, and what's going on in your home life, and what's going on in your checkbook. And those type of things, the real things that become hardships for us. So, and Tom made it clear for me when we hooked up, initially from day one, it's like, this is what I expect in our relationship. This is what you expect from me. This is what I can expect from you. And if that's ever compromised, then this relationship will no longer exist. And if I ever question that there's a compromise to that, I'm getting your permission now to go around you to find out if that's full disclosure is being given or given not. So that's how that was addressed with me. I'm not a super fan of long distance sponsorship, especially with new folks. I do sponsor a couple guys long distance, but I'm just not a big fan of it for the most part. But starting a men's group, we do a men's retreat in Mount St. Francis, Indiana. Bob's been to it, Steve's been to it, Danny's been to it. And we do it in Louisville. It's in Louisville, but it's really in Indiana, about 10 minutes outside of that. And it's the first weekend in every December. This will be our eighth year doing that retreat. You guys are welcome to come to that. It's not as mature as definitely this retreat by far, but it's still an awesome time. It's an awesome experience. But out of that, we started a men's group back in St. Louis, similar to what Joe did. And the group meets on Sunday nights, called Do You Want to Try the Truth? The group format basically is really this. It's really this. When we start with a 10-minute meditation, that's how the group starts. It's 10 minutes of meditation, and then we have a 10-minute speaker, usually on a subject of, we have a basket, really. We have 12 floating topics that go for the year, and you have a speaker for 10 minutes, and after that speaker's leave, we break up into small groups, 5 or 6 guys, one-on-one for the rest of the meeting, so everybody has a chance to share, and you have real accountability to what you're saying. So that's been my experience for those two things. So my turn, your turn.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
We answered all that, didn't we? Yeah. What was your most impactful amends?
Well, I think the most impactful amends was the one I shared with you about my Uncle Bob. I mean, that was by far the most proud. It was a game changer for me. I mean, it changed my life. The second most impactful amends for me was would have been my dad's. My dad had 2 daughters, Teresa and Debbie, and he actually had another son named Michael who died at birth. But I had Teresa and Debbie, and they're probably about 10 or 12, somewhere right around 8 years older than I am. And I never met them ever in my life. In 1993, they kind of reached out to me a little bit, and that was when I was just really getting going, and we exchanged some letters and some photos, but it never really amounted to anything. And they were in that same category as my Uncle Bob. I didn't ever meet him. I never did do nothing to him. I really didn't feel like I owed him much of anything. And that's just really where my heart and my mind was. But I guess right around the same time Uncle Bob then it was on my heart that, hey, I got these sisters. They're a part of my life, and I'm crazy for not being a part of their life. And and I started outreach. In the 9-step part of this book, it tells us that we're to take the lead in our 9-step work. And it's one of the biggest things that I missed in the 9-step work is that I'm required to take the lead. I used to use all the excuses they talk about here, for not making amends. Well, at least I'm sober today. That's the best thing I can do is stay sober. What a selfish statement, but I used to say that all the time in my early sobriety. And my favorite of all is if God wants them in my life, he'll put them in my life. And here's my answer to that. If they're on planet Earth and they're breathing, guess what? They're in your life, brother, so don't talk prudence while practicing evasion, as our book says. And so I knew it was time, and I reached out to him. And the cool part about that was I went over and reunited with my sisters. My one sister's a prescription drug addict, been an alcoholic and a drug abuser. She looks like she's probably 85 years old, and I think she's like 60. Bad shape. When she sits around, her tongue hangs out her mouth like a dog who ran 10 miles. She's in bad shape. It's brutal. And she's been that way for many, many years. My other sister, Teresa, is awesome. She's got 6 kids, and most of them boys. And I go over, and we have the time of our life when I go over there, and they're all total hillbillies, total crazy guys. They're Kansas boys. As country as you can get. I turned them on to the Turtle Man. Anybody know who the Turtle Man is? There you go. I turned them on to the Turtle Man, and next time I go over there, they go, "Come on, you got to come out to our house." I went out there, and they had this big old giant cooler full of snapping turtles. They've been out in the ponds pulling these turtles out. They were inspired by the Turtle Man. And I said, I'm glad I'm making a difference in your guys' life. But it's awesome. That's what the 9-step is. Just it's amended my life. But the kicker with the 9-step, I think, most importantly, is that we really don't know how much damage we do to people in people's life. It's like a domino effect. The dominoes just fall so deep. We have no idea of the damage we do to people's life. And at the same time, we don't even know. But when we go back and take ownership for that and we heal from that, we have no idea of the healing that comes from going back and taking ownership for that. I remember, I've heard, being in the prison system, and I've seen some tremendous amends go down, and for a lot of reasons, but there's been a lot I've heard around the country from people, and I remember Clint Hodges. Clint had a guy that he was working with, and I use this analogy a lot to bring home this point, because Clint had this guy that he was working with, and this guy committed a lot of burglaries, a ton of burglaries, and did a lot of time for some of those burglaries. But he had some he was never caught for, and when he got out, it was on his 8-step list. I need to make this amends, and he knew he needed to make the amends, but he was terrified to go face these people that he had stolen from, and so finally he got the nerve to do it, and he went to their house, and old couple, and finally got the courage to go knock on their door, and they answered the door, and he told them in a summary why he was there, and they invited him into their house, and they sat down at the table, and they said, I think around now 9 years ago, I broke into your house, and I took these items, and I did these things, and I've been in the penitentiary. I've served some time. I've gotten caught, but this particular deal wasn't part of my deal. And he goes, and I owe you, a direct amends to make that right. He couldn't even get all that out of his mouth before the people were in tears. They were absolutely in tears, and they said, "Son, you've done more than you'll ever know by showing up here today." And he said, "Why is that?" And they said, "Well, because we blamed our son for that crime, and we ain't talked to him for 9 years. We hadn't let him step foot in his house for the last 9 years because we blamed him for that crime." And that's the game changer, that we don't know how far, how powerful, how deep it's going to go back to take ownership. So we have to take the lead for that. And man, the dark side will come up with every reason why we don't need to take the lead. I had a guy, I was sharing this with somebody yesterday. I had a guy that I sponsored about 10 years sober, and we were sitting down, and when you get somebody that's been around that long and they work to the steps, you almost, is your inventory current, and let's go talk about your amends. Where are you at with the 8-step? So he brought his 8-step, we met, and we were going through it, and I said, "What's up with this girl here?" And he said, "Well, this girl was the girl that I raped when I was 14 years old, and we got in we got arrested for that, and I did some juvenile time for that, and it was a big deal. My parents actually had to move. They actually moved to Nashville." He said, after all that happened, that's how big a deal it was. And this all took place in Paducah, Kentucky. And I said, "Well, what's been your amends process with that gal?" And he says, "Well, nothing." He goes, "Sponsorship's always told me to stay away from that one." And I said, why is that? He said, "Well, because I cause, I don't want to, except when I do so, or to injure them or others." And I said, "Well, tell me how you're going to cause more harm to this girl than what you've already done to her." And then he started to give me a lot of what ifs. Well, what if? And I said, that's all pie in the sky stuff. I mean, just tell me concrete how you're going to cause more harm to this girl than what you've already done to her for not taking ownership for her. He goes, well, I don't really know. And I said, well, is she still alive? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, she still live in Paducah? Yeah. And he says, do you kind of know where she's at, her address? He goes, yeah. And I said, well, let's write a letter to her, and let's go through it, and let's send it certified mail with a return envelope, return stamp says we got it, and we worked through that, and then this is how things work out, because a week later was the Kentucky State Convention. I happened to be speaking at the Kentucky State Convention that year, which happened to be in Paducah, Kentucky. And I said, so why don't you go to the convention with me? I'm going to drive over there. It's not too far. You can ride with me. And I said, let's do this amends. He mailed that amends letter on a Tuesday. We're talking 20 years later that this happened. On Friday morning before we left, she called him. And she says, I want to let you know that I got that letter, and it meant the absolute world to me. She goes, I've been a Christian woman all my life. And she goes, I forgave you many, many years ago. She goes, but I've been praying for you for all those time. I never knew what happened to you. I'm so glad to hear you're sober. I'm so glad your life's together. But it means everything in the world to me that you reached out to me and shared this amends with me. And you're forgiven. And God bless you. You don't ever have to call me again. And I wish you the very best. But that guy was never the same cat ever since that day till now. He was set free from that. So there's all kinds of powerful amends to be made. And it's the most underused work. I've heard a lot more fourth and fifth steps than I ever heard of eighth and ninth steps in the for recovery. And that's where the magic happens for so many people. It's where the magic happened in my life. So I don't know where you're at with it. And some of them seem as petty as they can get. I had a guy they had on his men's list, and he had $50 that he had stole from his gym teacher at Betterman School. He said, if you guys quit smoking, for everybody who quits smoking, I'll give you $50. And he took his money and bought cigarettes. And I said, well, yeah, and this like 25 years later, I said, well, what's up with that? I said, you ever clean it up? He goes, well, man, it's $50. He goes, I don't even know if the guy's still there anymore. I said, well, you haven't ever tried. I said, you owe the guy $50. So he calls down to school, and that guy's still coaching. And he's still the PE teacher. And I said, you got to go down there. So he went down there, and he met the guy, and he walked in and met with him. He says, yeah. And he says, I don't know if you remember me. He goes, yeah, I kind of remember you. And he goes, you gave I think 3 of us $50 to quit smoking in your class. He goes, oh yeah. And he goes, that's the last time I've ever done that. And he goes, well, I'm here to pay you $50. And he goes, and some interest if I owe it to you or whatever else. He goes, I don't want your money. He goes, well, what can I do to make it right? He goes, oh, I got something for you to do to make it right. He goes, what's that? He goes, I want you to come down they gave him like 3 or 4 dates. I want you to come down and tell your story to my gym class. Tell them your story, what God's did in your life. And that's how he paid retribution for that amends. So the 9th step is a big, big deal. And I could go on and on about amends, and I know Danny could too, but those are some of the more impactful ones, third party and direct, that played out in my life. All right, now this is a trivia question, and you're going to be stumped by this one. I couldn't even answer this one right now, so I'm glad you got this question, Danny. Are you ready?
I don't have this question.
And it says, what is the meaning of the saying on the back of this year's T-shirt?
Oh, Fred? Well, I just thought of that. He's the guy in the book that took a drink, and they didn't hear any more from him for a while. Okay, next. Please tell us about one of your more recent 12-step calls.
Oh, man, I'll tell you, the most recent 12-step call was a heartbreaker for me. It was a kid that called me. I sponsored this kid 10 or 12 years ago. This kid's name was Owen, and he called me out of the blue one night about 10 o'clock at night, and he said, you remember who I said, yeah, Owen, I remember who you are. And he goes, man, I'm back. He goes, I'm in a lot of trouble, and I've just really destroyed my life, and I want you to see if you'd work with me again. And so I went and met with him and agreed to do the deal, and and he got plugged in, and I got too involved with this guy. I got too emotionally sucked in, and I know better, and I haven't really got sucked in like that in a long time. But I got sucked into this guy because I really cared about this guy. And but the guy, it was amazing to me. He would surrender. He would do a lot of actions. He would do everything you tell him to for a certain period of time, and then it would just be back to just taking the reins back in his life and doing his own thing. And he relapsed one night when he wouldn't follow the rules at this particular halfway house we got him into, and halfway, you had to be either working or you had to be going to school full time, and if you didn't do one of the two by a certain amount of time, you had to get out. And he wasn't going to school full time, he was going 9 hours a week, and he didn't have a job, and they asked him to leave, and he got resentful, and he walked down, and he got 2 cans of beer, went down into a homeless shelter that night, got in 4 or 5 altercations, got stabbed twice, once in the back, just barely missed his spine, once in the stomach, just barely missed his organs. Lived through it, got out, surrendered again. And I just kept getting sucked in by this guy. And it just happened like 2 or 3 times that, he was surrendering, and we'd do this dog and pony show for 6 months. And then finally I got down to page 96, and I had to let this guy go. And his mom called me out of the blue and says, "Hey, we just got Owen, we're dragging him over to your house." And I said, "My house is not the place for Owen anymore, and I don't know what you're going to do with him." She goes, "Well, I don't know what to do with him." And I said, "Well, and I gave her some options. But, and it was a heartbreaker for me, It's an absolute heartbreaker. I hate this illness sometimes. I absolutely hate it. I hate it when people got it. It's a heartbreaker. We have a young lady in St. Louis, her name's Christine. And this gal is an example of what not to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And 45 years old, been around AA 15 years, beautiful gal, hooked on heroin, hooked on booze, got a beautiful daughter. I mean, knockout, gorgeous, beautiful daughter, just great parents, great family. Had every woman probably in AA as their sponsor at one point in time. 2 Saturday nights ago, I get a call about 11 o'clock at night that says, "Did you hear what happened to Christine?" I thought they were going to tell me she killed herself, or she died and overdosed or did something. But she had, I guess, made some run and was drinking and bought some heroin tablets and was coming back and slammed into a car and killed a 91-year-old man and his 90-year-old wife, and was sitting on the curb when the cop showed up with a syringe in her shirt and a bottle of booze in her hand, and I just broke for her, so it's a tough deal, this thing called alcoholism that we got. But that's the most recent, and that's pretty recent. That 12-step call went on with this guy Owen, and it was a hard one, Go ahead.
My most recent one wasn't quite that impactful. The guy called from his house, and nobody wanted to go, because we were in this group where probably, I would say, if you had 100 people at that group, probably 10 of us have ever, if you called, and we could go on a 12-step call. We would have some idea of how to behave, what to do, what to expect. But most everybody else is like, you're drunk, somebody send an ambulance, can get him in a treatment center. But this guy wasn't, that wasn't the case. He was drunk, he was at home, he was a danger to himself. And so I got one of the newer guys who really had a great big guy too. I mean, he's a hoss. I said, you'll do, let's go. Because I've been on some of these, and I figure if we're going to have a fight, he's going to win. And we went over there, and the guy's sick and he's shaking and he needs a drink, and there's no place to take him yet. So the guy that was with me said, "Well, what are we going to do? We're stuck with him." And I said, "Yes, we are," and we were. We were stuck with him for a while. So we cleaned his house up. We helped clean him up. We just sat and talked. Didn't talk to him much about recovery because he was just shaking. So. We fed him some beer here and there because he was getting sick, and as soon as we got where we could get him out of there, we got him down to the detox to get him in there, and then we followed up on him to see how he was doing and try to see if we could get him from there into a group or into a 12-step recovery house, and that didn't happen because he got to feeling better and decided he'd overreacted. You know, and the one thing we don't want to do, we certainly don't want to sober up an innocent man, you know. Okay, how do you start working with a new sponsee who already has considerable sober time? I think we answered that really. Good try. I'll say, what do you do as a sponsor when you feel I can't even read that. What do you do as a sponsor when you feel you've taken the man you sponsor as far as you can?
Well, I mean, there's really more to the meat of that question, you know, what do you mean as far as you can? I mean, does anybody who wrote that question want to elaborate on what you mean by that?
Nobody's
Nobody's going to take ownership for that.
Well, okay, when I wrote this, what I meant.
What'd you mean, Daddy?
Here's what I was trying to say.
All right, why don't you answer your own question, Daddy?
You know, I'm gonna read between the lines, but sometimes I think we get a little twisted up about what our responsibility as a sponsor is. I totally agree with Harold about what it is as far as being a mentor, being accountable, taking a guy through the steps, making sure that this guy is doing the deal and walking, because it says you and the new man, and that new man gets older, but he's got to walk day by day with you. And I think that we owe it to one another to be sure that we're doing that. Because if I'm going to show up and talk, Steve and I talk fairly regularly, and it's not always a one-way conversation. It's not always me talking about where I'm at. It'll go both ways, and that's what happens. And there isn't, you know, in Keys to the Kingdom, it says AA is not a way of life that can be finished and done with. You don't take a guy as far as he can, and then that's that. You know, this is a lifelong friend. If I felt like a guy needed some help that God wasn't providing me the insight to help him with, I would, in a heartbeat, I would refer him to someone who I thought could help him. You know, I would continue to be in his life, continue to be a friend. But I certainly, I'm not looking for a notch in my gun. I want the guy to be happy, joyous, and free.
Good answer, Dan. Says, if you could get just 3 points over to a new man, what are they?
Don't drink. Read the book and go to meetings. No. You know, the 3 points I think I really would get over to a guy. You know, when I'm talking to him, one thing I want to know is, it's really important to me to find out, are you alcoholic? I mean, we have a way of finding out. You know, are you here because of your drinking? And this is whether or not I've found somebody where I've gone to their house and it's on a 12-step call, or whether I've met them in a men's recovery house, or whether they've walked into our home meeting. Now, and all of those put you in a little different spot when you talk to them. But you know, I always want to know, if you're wanting to do this deal, I want to know, are you all in? Do you really want to do this deal? I mean, because if you're just going to play with this, if you're not sure that this is for you, then sit here for a while and see if it is or not. But I'm not going to sit down and start committing a lot of my time to someone who's going to call and break appointments with me, and who not sure that they want to do this thing. I don't have 3 points. I don't even have a formula. When I talk to somebody and they're new, especially, the first thing I do is I say a prayer, and I just ask God to direct my thinking, because I want to be very sure that I'm listening to what this guy's saying. I want to know how much trouble he's in. I want to know, you know, when's the last time you had a drink? You know, are you going to be able to make it through the night without a drink? Do I need to sit with you? you know, do you have any legal problems right now that's pressing on you? Is your wife got you kicked out of the house? Or are you living in your car? I mean, I think for me, it's like I want to know all the basic stuff right away. Where you actually sitting? And so that's what I do. This last one. How do you get family and spouse involved in recovery program? Suggestions.
Good luck. Good luck, man. You know, I mean, it's that's a slippery slope. I mean, our book, Family Afterward, talks all about that. I mean, and then get into that situation, and you can invite. I mean, sometimes you have willing participants that are willing to walk that journey with you, and sometimes not so much. You can make somebody feel real resentful, especially if they really feel like you're the problem, you know. And they have their own spiritual action of recovery or program that they're working and they're comfortable with. That's a challenging thing, but I think it's a process. I mean, our book gives clear-cut direction on that, you know, and it is time. It just takes time, and there's no guarantees of anything. I mean, what's our book say? It says, beat in the head of every alcoholic that he can get sober regardless of what happens in his family life, you know. So, but I think that's a slippery slope when you start trying to tell people, here's what they need to do. You can invite them. Our book gives a lot really gentle direction. You know, you can invite your spouse to pray with you. You may start going back to church and being a better church member than you've ever been before. You can recommend a lot of things. You can invite them to an open event, to a potluck, to a conference or whatever. But prying and pushing and manipulating them into, you know, some kind of recovery program because you want them to walk side by side with you it's a slippery place for you, because nothing will mess you up quicker than trying to change somebody. You know, nothing will mess you up quicker. I mean, and it just will. And I remember talking to a couple this is a couple that actually go to my church, and they were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. And I ran into them separately, and the guy's named Bob and Donna. And I ran into Bob and I said, Bob, congratulations, man, on 50 years. I said, that's incredible, being married 50 years. I said, how did you do it? And his exact words for me, he says, I never tried to change that woman. And just a little bit later, in another hall, I was walking out, and there's Donna. I said, Donna, congratulations on 50 years. I think that's incredible. And how did you do it? She goes, Harold, I never tried to change that man. I've always let him try to be the guy he is. And just a lot to be taken from that, you know. And so trying to change people will mess you up, brother. So good luck. One more, Danny.
One more? When does the intention in helping others shift from self to God's will? That's a little too deep for me. I'm like in and out of self frequently anyway. I don't know. Helping others always pulls me out of self. And self is just always just like, it's just like right there all the time. All I need to do is just sit around the house for a while, watch sports by myself, pet my dog, and not answer the phone for a couple hours. And now I'm just all about self, period. Even if it feels good, I'm still, you often think that being into self is like feeling bad. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Sometimes being into self is just very, very safe and pleasant. And you don't want anybody disturbing you. The problem is that, I can do alone time really well, but my alone time turns very rapidly into isolation. And then I'm thinking about everything and everybody. And I'll start watching. I got off when they had the what was that? The politics thing. The presidential election. Oh my God. I didn't even have an opinion on it, but in a little while, I was mad at everybody. I didn't like Republicans. I didn't like Democrats. My wife and I wasn't talking to each other. The dog growled at me. hadn't got anything. See, but you said, don't try to answer the question. Well, I didn't. And, you know, God's will, that's a big thing. But what is God's will? God's will, in the big book it says, it's God's will for us to be happy, joyous, and free. To be free of need. And everything that we do seems to be designed to free me from the bondage of self, to allow me to come out of that isolation and participate in this wonderful creation that God has for us, and to get to know His kids. And this is what AA does for us. AA takes us from the I situation to the we situation, and it's God's will that I stay in here, that I stay plugged in. I don't know the answer to this question, but I do know that being in the middle of God's will is being free. Thank you. One more? I thought we were out of time.
No.
One more.
No.
We got.
7:45, quarter up. You got about.
Oh my God, you got a lot of stuff to answer here. Well, I'll get this. This is this long one for you. Have you ever hit bottom? This is for me. Have you ever hit bottom during sobriety? No, it's for you. Describe that bottom and how you got through it and where you were transported to.
Well, I think I answered it last night, and I think this is a pretty common thing for guys of all ages and women too, really, is that we have an initial bottom from drinking that brings us to the doors of AA and to a place of surrender, but then there's another whole emotional surrender to self that comes into play, and for me that was 3 years, and 3 years is a pretty common number. I talked to a lot of guys, and that seems to be a pretty good time frame for a lot of guys, where they finally, it's kind of the old bait and switch. Hey, guess what? You're alcoholic, you're powerless. Okay, yeah, I'll finally buy in, I'm alcoholic. And then you get here and guess what? Well, alcohol is really not your problem, so bait and switch, pull the rug right out from underneath you, and then you're faced with what the truth is, what the root of the problem is. And I think pain is what brings that revelation out of us, unfortunately. And I told you I was in AA, and the first 3 years I was in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I loved the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, loved it. My first year of sobriety, I had a sober band named Alliance. We played all kinds of sober gigs. I was having the time of my life. Played on the Hampton Highballers softball team. I went on float trips. I went to a lot of mixed meetings. I went to I went to a lot of dances, and I was a hillbilly, never danced a lick before I got sober. But I learned how to dance real fast. I had the MC Hammer pants, and I was out there. I was out there doing the Vogue, and had all the moves. Had the moves like Jagger, as they say, I did all that stuff. I was heavily involved in the fellowship of that. But when it comes to what the program is, I wasn't working any program. I didn't have any accountability. I had no real sponsorship, figurehead sponsorship, just to say I didn't have one. So I had some name, I throw out there. Yeah, I got Woody's my sponsor, and who knew who Woody was, but kept the dogs off you long enough to move on. And that was my life. And I had a lot of good people that, people tried to corner me and get me to work certain things, and I just avoided. I just ran my life, and I ran my life right into the ground. And how I didn't drink or blow my brains out is beyond me, The desire to drink burned hard in my heart. That desire is as strong today as it was the day that I surrendered in that jail cell. That's never left me. But that desire to run my own life, that's a whole different story, And I wanted to manage my own life and every aspect of it. And that's where I crashed and burned. That was the first time. And like I said last night, I asked that guy to be my sponsor. I went to his house, and I was a broken guy, absolutely discouraged guy, ready to quit, not ready to kill myself, probably too afraid to do that, not ready to drink, but I didn't know what I was going to do. I absolutely had no hope. I was a discouraged, broken little guy, and I asked that guy to sponsor me. And like I said, he told me that, Harold, everything you have in your life, as you sit here at my table right now, you have because of the person you become. And until you can own that, little's going to manifest in your life. Little's going to change, and I finally took ownership for that. But I've hit all kinds of emotional bottoms, I've hit financial bottoms, I've hit sexual conduct bottoms, I've hit all kinds of bottoms in recovery, and all based on self, all wanting to run my life and to keep this little area of my life. If you looked at my life and on a chart, and you could easily say, well, that he's sold out for God in this area of his life, he's sold out over here, but not so much here and not at all here. Compartmentalized, my life was, and probably still is today in many ways. I mean, and where I'm just totally in and not so much, and it's usually, it takes a lot of pain for me to get there. And so there's been many times, but where does that take me? It just takes me into a deeper relationship with God every single time. In summary, if I want to live a happy life, then I need to live, I need to deny myself. If I really want to live, I have to deny myself. And for somebody who's extremely self-centered, that sounds great intuitively, but from, I'm just an emotional creature I'm just such a get-high freak. I mean, I was the kind of guy my whole life. I was the kind of guy that wanted everybody to pay attention to him, but then I wanted everybody to leave me the hell alone. And the kicker was I wanted you to do it at the same time, So if you just walk in and say, Harold, I think you're freaking awesome, and never talk to me the rest of the night, I would be great, But that's not what happened, So this whole squirrel cage of guys would start talking, the boys would start talking, and it just drive you insane. And like I said, I got names for all those guys, that live up there. They're the funeral director that every time you get a pain in your toe that you got toe cancer and you're going to die, and he's telling you how many people aren't going to be at the funeral when you die. It's going to be a sad situation, that guy. I mean, I can go that fast. I can go from a pain in my toe to death and disappointed that they didn't play Freebird at my, at the funeral. That's the mindset that I got. So I've hit a lot of bottoms, and from a drinking bottom, I tell guys all the time, well, how do you know when you hit bottom? I said, you think you hit bottom? Keep drinking. Just keep drinking if you think you've hit bottom, because you don't know what bottom is, and just keep on drinking, brother, because it's still out there for you, until you die. That's the ultimate bottom. So that's it for me on that one. How about you, Big D?
I don't remember what the question was.
Well, I'll give you another one. You ready? Expand for us. Big, bold letters, highlighted, italicized, underlined. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all of our traditions. Exactly what do you think that means?
Give me another one. Are you trying to answer that? Oh, he raised his hand back there. I'll tell you, when I think about that, there probably means a lot more than I know. But for one thing, for sure, is that big shotism it seems to abound in here. I certainly have it, and the whole principle of being anonymous and being a worker among workers has really worked well for me. I didn't really want it to. I'd like to be a worker that directs other workers, but being one among many has made a big difference in my life, and also the whole anonymity principle of we don't seek our own fame or our own anything, and we try to protect the other fellow next to us so that we can all come here and do this thing together and grow quietly and strongly together without the fear that we're going to be talked about or put down, or somebody's going to get the praise for it or not get the praise for it. To just come in and all be together. I think that's what I feel like out here is that there is an anonymity here, because we're like here in this bowl and we're all in here together, and nobody's really if there's anybody in charge, I certainly haven't been able to find him. And everybody is just involved in this thing, and nobody seems to be trying to be in charge. I think it's a wonderful deal. I don't give a lot of thought to what all this stuff means sometimes, but I try to adhere to the general principle that I'm better off just being one of the guys, and I really do believe that. When I have tried to, I've gone around the country and spoke a little bit, and when I first started doing that, I thought that was really like, wow, this is really cool. And I really couldn't wait to tell everybody that I don't use my last, I only use my last initial, but it is me. And, and then one of my friends, heard my tape, and he said, yeah, that is you. And I said, oh, and he said, Danny, he said, around here, you become an AA bum. You drive by, you come in late, you leave early, you make sure you share. And he said, I don't even know if you leave $1 in the basket. And this was a few years ago. This was back when I was going through my bankruptcy. And I was like, oh, that really, that stung to hear. But it was the truth, That was the way my entire life looked like. I was so obsessed with my current spiritual and financial state, and I couldn't see to stop where I was, to drop to my knees, to ask for God for help, to turn to somebody and say, I've got this to go through. How do I do it? So I don't know what that had to do with anonymity, but I just wanted to say that. That's it. You've got time for another one.
How's our watch doing?
Our watch says we've got 4 minutes, so don't make this a long answer. We want your short story. Expand on the relationship with you can't do this. Expand on your relationship with your family after you had made your amends.
Well, my biggest amends were, my mom. I'll just share about my mom. I really didn't talk a lot about her. I told you about Uncle Bob and my sisters and that. My mom, I told you, had 3 kids. I had a sister Sandra, a sister Cynthia, and a brother Bob, and they're all 15, right around 12 to 15 to 17 years older than I am. I never even met those guys till I was about 9 years old. When my mom moved back to St. Louis, was the first time I met any of them. My mom was obviously my biggest amends. I put that lady through so much, in such amount of time, and to a woman who did nothing but try to give me the absolute best of life. So that was the hardest amends I ever had to make. I remember in 1979 when I was in a treatment center, they had families show up there, and my mom, of course, was the only family member I had, and she showed up, and they made us sit around in group therapy, and they made me turn and face my mom, and they had us write out our first step, and I had to sit there and read that to her as part of this group program, and I couldn't even finish it. It just broke me in half. I couldn't even look her in the eyes because of the shame that I had even back then. And that wasn't enough to keep me from drinking. I continued to drink and run and rip hard for a long, long time. And getting sober with my mom, and my mom couldn't be more proud today that I'm a sober member of AA. She loves Alcoholics Anonymous. My mom's 80 years old today. Last year she had a hip replacement. She had to come live with me for a couple months, about 3 months, and it was awesome having mom around, taking care of her. Like I said, she's been the absolute greatest winner in my life. My sister Cynthia is a very devout Catholic. She's the principal of Assumption Church there in St. Louis, Missouri. The lady's never, had an issue in her life. One of the greatest examples of a human being you could ever meet is my sister Cynthia, and I have a great, I admire her so much, and her daughter works for me full time, and I just love her kids, and she's just a great reflection of her. My sister Sandra, got a good relationship with her. She's a very bitter woman. She got a lot of resentment in her life still today. She's married 4 times, a couple of them bad alcoholics. She had her dad, like I said, their dad was a bad alcoholic, and she just got major resentments. Very sad woman, and I just pray for her all the time. God bless her, but she's just an unhappy soul. My brother, God bless my brother. My brother is, when he was 52 years old, this guy has never drank, never smoked, never done drugs. I don't even know if he's ever said a cuss word. But he got 3 boys that are just dynamic. At age 52, my brother had a massive stroke, and he's been paralyzed and in a wheelchair ever since. And it just breaks my heart, It breaks my heart. And I go at least one Thursday a month, I go over and hang out with him. You know, most of the time I'll take my mom with me. You know, we'll go over and see my brother and hang out. And it's just hard to see him sitting there in that chair, and that's his life, you know? That's it. Doesn't go anywhere. Hardly ever leaves the house unless he's got to go to a doctor's appointment. Loves Cardinals baseball. And I'm really hoping if it works out right for his birthday in August, I'm trying to get some connections together, but I'm really trying to get one of the Cardinal baseball players to come over to his house and on his birthday. It's my goal this year for his birthday present. And so I'm trying to pull that off. I don't know if that'll happen or not, but I know it'd mean the world to him if that happened. But so that's where it's at with my family today. You know, my immediate family. They're grateful I'm sober. I'm grateful I'm sober, and I owe it all to you guys in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Our watch says it's over.